Welcome very, very much to Conversation. A personal pleasure, a great pleasure and honor to welcome to the program one of my dearest friends in this whole universe, and that's Joshua Volinski, a friend of mine, a networker extraordinaire, a bibliophile of the highest order, with a very interesting personality, a very loving kind of way he has in terms of dealing with the world, a major networker of people. And Josh, so good to welcome you here. It looks like spring's trying to come in, and that might be a good harbinger of times ahead.
Oh, I'm just honored to be here. And as an honor to you, I'm wearing this tie. And, you know,
that's pretty lively, yeah.
You're a professor of geography.
Well, that's what I did my work in, yeah.
That's my dedication to you. You're just a wonderful professor of geography.
Well, that looks like a combination of Mercator and different kinds of projections, but it certainly is colorful. Yes,
and
very
a few
colorful.
days ago,
yeah.
I said to a 38-year-old woman who was an intern to Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State, and she's from Albania.
Yeah.
So when I mentioned that you were a professor of geography, she was really deeply impressed. And this is a very sophisticated woman who has degrees from NYU, Columbia, and of course across the street, John Jay College.
Yeah, well, that could be, because it was like geography used to be a very rich and core part of curriculum in universities, particularly in the 19th century, Humboldt, and that was a core issue. That was a core thing that was part of the educational process. But it doesn't have much clout, as they say, in terms of its cachet or anything like that. Now, they don't even have a department any longer at Harvard, for instance. And it's partly because geography is so nebulous in terms of people's mind. It's not specialized at all. Because geography, you can be a geographer of climate, you can be a geographer of soils, you can be interested in geology, you can be where the oil is, political patterns, historical patterns, all kinds. It's so comprehensive inherently that people say, what's the point? Because the academic process is becoming so highly specialized that they say there's no point in anything that is relevant to large pattern thinking. Yet I am of the opinion that that's exactly what our educational process needs, is more systems thinking, inclusive, not specialization, but comprehensive systems view. So I'm proud of the thing that it's geography and that you have a wide sweeping interest in.
The bottom line.
Well, it's
the basis of everything.
It's a little hard in geography to fit in astrophysics, but you can do it if you want to. You can fit into the physics of the universe and everything. And it moves towards systems thinking. That's what I think are the people that mostly I admire, that I find, are the people who are thinking about comprehensive pattern recognition rather than the details of any particular thing that's going on, you know, if you understand what I mean. So
I studied some geography, and the minute there was trouble in the Ukraine, the minute it happened, I said, because I studied a little geography, and you know that's near the Black Sea, a wonderful seaport and everything, it's also near the Sea of Azov. And so on. And I knew where it was, and I said, there is no way that anyone of Russian origin is not going to be alarmed or upset. There's no way, because my grandparents and parents were in the Ukraine.
Right. Well, that was a very geopolitically, that's a very interesting thing for those who think geopolitically. That is, there's a couple of links that I could make. First of all, I think economics and politics are joined at the hip. They go almost together, and they would try to separate them, but also geopolitics, geography and politics are joined at the hip. And geopolitics has a relationship between the international order and the geography. And there is thinking that has informed the relationship between the nations over the years, particularly like in the 19th century, and Britain ruled the waves, and they had an empire that was stretching out. And there was always it's called the Heartland, and there was a little dictum that came down in terms of the geography, and it was back to Humboldt and everything, and then it said, he who controls the North European plain, there's a plain that comes into Russia from Europe and so forth, controls what is called the Heartland, and the Heartland is that branch or that area of the Eurasian landmass, He who controls the North European plain controls the Heartland. And the Heartland is that part that is invulnerable to sea power, because you have land power and sea power between the nations of the world and so forth. And he who controls the Heartland, and that would be like Sea of Azov or down into Afghanistan and so forth, and that area has been, that was where they were driving for Stalingrad and all that. And then he who controls the world island controls the world. The world island would be that whole Eurasian landmass that extends out past the into Africa and so forth. And he who controls the world island controls the world. And that thinking informed McMahon and the other thinkers of geostrategic thinking, including the Germans and so forth, mightily. And it was what was involved with the Vietnam syndrome.
Yeah.
Because the Soviets had taken over and had controlled that. And then along came an ideology called Communist China in 1948. And there was great worry by the geopoliticians that Heartland had been taken over by an alien force called communism, and it was like a big red amoeba coming out from the Heartland. And it was coming out, and it was going to have internal logistics advantages. They were going to take over the role of running the world that had been inherited from Britain by the United States and so forth. And that's why we had to invade, or they said they're going to be coming out and then they'll take over the nations of Vietnam and so forth. We can't allow that because they'll be in San Francisco raping our daughters and that kind of stuff. They got involved in Vietnam thinking it was part of an international conspiracy, and that's what informed the geopolitical thinking. Anyway, that was George Kennan in Mr. X article.
And then, of course, when I was young, there was one word my parents and my grandparents used frequently that used to be a lot more important than it is today. Wheat.
Wheat. Oh,
That's
yeah.
That was what the Ukraine was all about.
Absolutely
Wheat.
Huge. Yeah. They could be. You're right. Absolutely right. Yeah. And that's where your people are from, I guess, right?
Yeah. And of course, they used to talk about the Tartars and also a little about some of the anti-Semitism among the people in the Ukraine. That was sort of prevalent there too. In fact, my matriarchal family was so well versed in the Russian language that the Tartars and the Ukrainians who were anti-Semitic used to say, "There's no way you're Jewish. You're putting me on. There's no way you're Jewish. You're so well versed."
Oh boy.
And so literate.
Well, why would they ever think that the Jews were not literate? They've been literate for centuries upon centuries. Real scholarship there. I don't know how anybody could not associate good scholarship. Also, an awful lot of good behavior in the name of real mensch kind of behavior by the part of the Jewish. I can never understand anti-Semitism.
Well, that's because to some people, they think Jewish people only do their own thing, Hebrew and Yiddish and all that, and stick to themselves. That's what really creates that misconception, That's my opinion.
Well, my opinion about the Jewish people, I don't know what's not to like. Their intellectual contributions are enormous, and they're good people, and they got a sense of justice and all of that. But anyway, that's my thinking.
And of course, like the museum, the Metropolitan Museum of Art pointed out maybe 2 or 3 years ago, there's a lot of gold and natural resources in the Ukraine. And that's why Senator McCain all of a sudden became such a advocate of them becoming independent. So he and his corporations can grab the natural resources of the Ukraine.
Well, things have changed since the communism imploded in 1989 and everything like that. And I heard Mr. Obama say, well, he doesn't represent... There was a time when the Soviet Union, after 1917 and all that, and that they represented a socialist view of the world, collectivization and all that, a real threat. But that sort of imploded by 1989. And I saw Mr. Obama saying, well, Mr. Putin doesn't represent any meaningful geopolitical or thinking, strategic thinking about any ideology or anything like that. It's just everything's state capitalism everywhere now, so it doesn't really have any ideological roots to what he's thinking. And that struck with me that he brought that up as a throwaway line almost. Mr. Obama did, yeah. They were a threat at an ideological level, in the name of socialism.
Yes.
Yes. In the minds of many,
Yes.
And also it was tied into that geopolitical thinking that informed the whole thing, the Korea and also the Vietnam, yeah. But anyway, we're getting a little bit of feel, but it's where you're from originally, right?
Yeah. Yeah, sort of. Well, I want to explain to people and to you, as you know, they used to call me like a new Renaissance man.
Yes.
Besides being a producer here at M&M.
Yes, by all means.
Which I love.
Yeah.
And I love the great personalities here, like Harold Hudson Janner.
Oh, it's a great group.
In the email, WBAI mentioned you had a splendid interview with Robert Knight, and I watched it because they put it in a press release. They put it right up.
Yeah, he passed. I'm really sorry to hear that. Yeah. I'm really sorry. He was a nice fellow guy. And I'm worried about WBAI. It seems to me they're under real duress now. You've been an advocate of...
He was stressed out at BAI very often because for two reasons. One, he was a very, very dedicated broadcaster, really hung up on the details and so anxious to do everything right and bring out the facts. And he could come apart a bit if things were not going right, and I was around. But I've been around, if Amy Goodman doesn't get what she needs and what she thinks meets her standards, she gets pretty upset too. So this is something to be expected in media.
Yeah.
It's sort of a nerve-wracking thing, especially if you want to get everything right that you're broadcasting. Make sure it's accurate. Make sure you have your facts. It's a very, very difficult and detailed job. So I've been there early in the morning when Robert Knight was doing the morning show.
You mean down on Wall Street, you mean?
Yeah. He could get very emotional about it. And they all do. I certainly wouldn't want to be around Gary Knoll when he's emotional. By the way, Gary Knoll is doing a free seminar at the Ethical Culture Society.
Major house, yeah.
On genetic modified foods. Genetically modified.
When? Do you have to know?
That's going to happen on May 21st.
May 21st.
Free of charge at the Ethical Culture Society.
You know what time of day? What day that is or not?
That's going to be at 6 p.m. And he needs all that time because he's going to show his new documentary called Seeds of Destruction. And he's going to give everyone in the audience a free copy of the book of Seeds of, and a free copy of the DVD.
Wow, okay, that's a new thing that he's put together then,
and he's also, and it's free of charge, and he's also going to give you his old DVD, Death by Medicine, or Pharmaceutical Drugs, and other things. So if you want to come and meet Gary Knoll and a world-renowned panel of experts on genetically modified food, which is a great...
Huge subject, isn't it? It really is, yeah. Huge subject, yeah.
When I go to his office, his the closet on 83rd Street, go up those stairs.
I don't know what you're talking about.
He has a few hundred DVDs that he has made over the years.
Right.
He even has one on Libya. But anyway, I noticed the other day he had a CD called Fascism Incorporated of what's happening today in the United States with the police departments and everything. 9 CDs by world-renowned experts on Fascism Incorporated.
Wow, is that more or less recent, or is
yes,
that, yeah?
If you go in, pick up a copy. In fact, I'll get you a copy. I'll get you a copy, and I bet you that everyone's email will send everyone on that set of CDs. See, I am a networker.
You sure are. You're an all-time great network. You know everybody, I think, in this universe, I believe, and you network between them. So that's sort of like a comprehensive overview.
So he has 9 experts on Fascism Incorporated. Of course, he leaves out, it was too late for him to get Arthur, what's his name, William Kunstler.
William Kunstler was wonderful.
Mike, and I didn't see Michael Ratner, who's
Center for Constitutional Rights. He's still kicking.
He's still active.
Right. We're very active.
But I'm sure you'll want to check out that group of CDs. 9. Yeah. I mean, you'll have your own radio station.
Well, you brought that all down. It was the May 21st. You don't happen to know what day that is, do you? You happen to know? Maybe we can look it up. I don't have a count.
It's one of these slower dates. It's either a Monday or Tuesday.
Okay, right. Okay, good. We could look it up. May 21st. That's easy.
May 21st. And Gary, of course, will be the master of ceremonies. Right. But generally, he lets the other people at the panel do their own talking, and we are in a lot of trouble.
You think we being the human society, is that what you mean?
Yeah, a lot of us are in trouble.
Yeah.
I agree with Amy Goodman. Now, you mentioned I'm a book file. So
you are a book file beyond you.
Bibliophile.
You ran the bookstore for so long over at CUNY, or over at City University. And you have a collection of books that are just just unending.
Okay, this just came out.
Divide.
This is about the wealthiest.
This
is about the wealthiest people in the world and the rest of us. And it's by Matt Taibbi, who's Taibbi, Taibbi, who's a journalist with Rolling Stone magazine.
Right.
And by the way, this woman who did this drawings, she has a strange name. I forget her name. I don't see it on the cover. He met her in Occupy Wall Street.
Oh, really?
And he liked her work so much. He let her do cover.
Boy, that's a really interesting cover. Yeah.
Yeah.
Griftopia. I see. Yeah. Is this just out now or what?
Yeah. It came out.
Okay, that's
good. It just came out.
Yeah, he's a major voice. I know. Yeah,
Amy Goodman did a program with him, and he told some astounding stories about, like, toward the beginning of the book, they mentioned this woman who applied for welfare. The investigators come to her house. Of course, they don't tell you when they'll come. So it's like old New York. You have to stay home all day because if you're not home, you're not going to get it. Just like if you're not there when you want food stamps, you're not going to get it. So finally, an inspector comes. He has a long pencil. Now, she's not supposed to have a husband or boyfriend getting any money. So he takes a long pencil or pen and goes into her drawers and pulls out fancy panties. So he said, if you live alone, who are these for? A fancy pen. So meanwhile, Matt points out the dichotomy of this situation. he says, you know, these people who rob you of millions and billions of dollars as hedge fund managers and mortgage lenders and banks, they don't ever have to face anything like that. They don't even go to jail when they cheat most of the time, like Morgan Stanley. But he said the poor people, if they find even a marijuana cigarette in their pocket, they spend more time in jail.
2.5 million people in prison, and most of them are drug-related for a little thing like marijuana, although that's all changing now, I think. That's changing very rapidly, the marijuana situation.
Well, it's changing, but not
drug-related prison industrial complex,
It's not. It's still... it really, when you finish this book, I haven't finished it yet. No. I'm still in the middle of it.
Yeah, right.
You see, it's between the super wealthy and the rest of us.
Yeah, let me get that. Let me read the cover here. It says, "Divide American injustice in the age of the wealth gap." That's and he appears on Bill Maher and on Charlie Rose and Amy and other things like that. A major voice and everything, very articulate and so forth. And but the age of the wealth gap, I wonder, do you think that we're coming to a time? It seems to me, in a certain sense, looking at history, it's always been a few people who run everything.
Yes.
You know, it's not as though... I'm wondering, is there something different than history, the time in which we are now? It seems to me it was the pharaohs, and then the Nebuchadnezzar, and then there was Rome, and you had Nero, and you had a bunch of people running things, and most of the people were just almost serfs or slaves. And during the kings and queens of England and of Europe, it was the same with serfs in the fields, just having nothing. And now it's down to where... So it's not... Is it something different in the time in which we find now, the wealth gap, or the fact that power and influence and disparity in terms of the opportunities of the society is now a few people control everything? But is that anything different than the way it's always been throughout almost all of history? Or what are we to think about that?
When we were younger, Harold, there was an interval when things were a little better. Maybe they needed us to dispose of Hitler and Mussolini. Maybe they needed the workers more. But it seems to me when we were younger, they had more compassion, sensitivity, and regard for common people. Like, for instance, in a retail, like I was in Retail City College.
Yeah, right. You ran the bookstore there for 20-odd years, didn't you? Like what a place to be,
Well, we used to have places like Tom McCann, where you could buy a good pair of shoes for $8 instead of for $50.
$50, right.
And we had John's Bargain Store, and we had Klein's on the square. All that has disappeared. Also, another thing that's disappeared, the rich who are more discreet about the kind of money they had and what they spend. For instance, in every neighborhood now, there are real estate offices. So, like you go into Harlem, in Drugsville, which used to be Drugsville, and you see a real estate office, you look in the window, and they say, you see an apartment for sale for $400,000, $500,000. Now they used to be discreet about these things. They used to hide. Yes, there were always rich people, but they sort of kept it out of your face. Now they rub it in. Where in Sunday's Times, this Sunday's Times, they had an article called The $1 Million Question. And what did it say? It said, if you have $1 million, you have $1 million,
disposable income,
and you're looking for an apartment, it goes almost nowhere.
What do you mean it goes nowhere?
In other words,
you
cannot get an apartment for $1 million easily, because most apartments are, so $1 million, you've got to be very careful if you're selling an apartment for $1 million. Now I know that I don't have it, and I know you don't have it,
Yeah.
and I know most of the people watching this program doesn't have it, but that's what the Sunday Times says. So what is an apartment? An apartment in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights,
Is the right to
according
housing.
to Eleanor Roosevelt,
Yeah.
is a human right.
Yeah.
And by the way, talking about Eleanor Roosevelt, yesterday, before I did my show, I bumped into Richard Wolff leaving M&N,
Right.
Manhattan Neighborhood
Yeah, he's
Network.
doing a good job.
And I
He's
said
doing
to
a
him,
job here, yeah.
I appreciate your reverence for Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Yeah, right.
Because I would starve to death without Social Security. Most of us
Came in
would.
35,
But I said,
yeah.
you know what criticisms many of your listeners give me about Roosevelt? They didn't like the idea about that famous story with the boat full of Jews. That,
I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, what?
They sent a bunch of, a large group of Jewish refugees came here on a boat. Roosevelt sent the boat back
I don't know
to Germany.
Yeah, okay.
That's a famous
Oh,
story.
right. It must have been a horror
Yeah.
when
yeah.
the stories were coming out of Europe
Yeah.
about what was
So
going
I
on
said,
and to not
I've
be able
met
to do
people
something. Yeah.
who differed with you on the greatness of Roosevelt just because of that. I said, I defend him all the time because I agree with you. But also the second thing was he was very favorable because that was the system to the Dixiecrats and the racists who ran the South in that time.
Well, he needed them for getting some things done.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah. The politics, yeah.
So you know what Richard Wolff said?
What did he say?
He said, I'm going to tell you a secret, Joshua. He said, I love Roosevelt, but you know who I liked more? I liked Eleanor Roosevelt.
Wow, okay,
I
that's
love
interesting.
Eleanor Roosevelt. And I said, yes, I've met her a few times, and she was the kind of person...
You've met Eleanor Roosevelt a few times?
She behaved like she knew you for years.
Oh, really? Okay, right.
She was
act,
interested in what you were doing and who you were, and really interested. Wasn't just being polite. And she was a wonderful woman. And when I mentioned that to Coley Clark, Coley said, that's correct.
Yeah.
She said...
She knew her also
Well,
somewhat,
she said there was a black woman, African-American woman, who they wanted to get on a board, and she was denied because of the color of her skin. But Eleanor Roosevelt got into the fray, and they had to admit her and hire her. So she said, you're right, Eleanor Roosevelt, and she's right, Eleanor. And when Westbrook Peddler told Mike Wallace that Eleanor Roosevelt is a phony, very ambitious phony, and then he confronted Eleanor Roosevelt and he said, what do you have to say about this criticism of Westbrook Peddler concerning you? And she said, that's a very, very peculiar thing, he said, because I don't hold any political office. She said, that's very peculiar. That was Eleanor. But she was just a lovely, powerful woman. And talking about women, here is an old book I picked up.
Okay, get it out of your sack. This is like Santa Claus on Christmas Eve, or Christmas morn.
This is an old book. Now, here's a book
he's got more books
nobody knows about.
Let me hold it up for you, okay? And then you can talk to the Illuminati. Okay, go on. Talk
now,
to the book.
her name is Belle DaCosta Green.
Okay,
and I don't think very many people heard of her.
No, the unilluminated life. Okay,
did you ever hear of her?
No, I have not. I must admit, I'm sorry, I haven't. No, I don't know. No.
Okay, you know what she is? She was interviewed for a job by J.P. Morgan. And you know what the job was?
No.
To be the librarian and the custodian of the Morgan Library.
Wow, so that's something else.
So he didn't have anything. But she was hired as the librarian.
That's over
of
on
the
36th
Morgan.
Street now?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a major place.
She was interviewed by J.T. Morgan when she was 18 years old.
Mm-hmm.
She was underage for a job as the librarian. She was so capable and so competent and so ethical. He was able finally to trust her with all his funds.
Wow.
And she went around the world and she bought all the paintings, all the illuminated manuscripts, all the tapestries.
I know, it's amazing.
So
amazing
she bought
center,
everything.
Yeah, it's an amazing place. Yeah, right. Yeah.
And she was the one who chose everything that's in that museum.
No fooling. Boy, that's a major thing. That really is. That's a major source of...
So this is the same story as the Pan-African... that the Pan-Africans tell about the traffic light and the elevator.
I don't know what that means.
A black man developed the traffic light.
Is that true? I didn't know that. Yes. Tell me about it. I don't know about that.
And the elevator.
And the I associate with Otis.
Yeah, they were the first ones to invent it. And the ironing board. And of course George Washington Carver. Now
he did peanut butter.
Yeah. Now here is the thing. She told J.P. Morgan.
Can we get this? Yeah, there we go. Okay.
She told him she's of Brazilian ancestry, and he never really checked it. She said she was Brazilian ancestry. It turns out that she was African American, and her parents were slaves.
I'll be damned.
On a plantation.
Really?
And where did she pick up all these values? On paintings? On tapestries?
Where did she pick it up?
Her father, when he was freed as a slave, eventually got accepted to Harvard Medical School.
Wow, okay.
And he got a medical degree at Harvard Medical School, and he was one of I think the first black man ever to attend Harvard University.
That was her father?
Yeah, her father.
Wow, well that would have been something...
So that's where she picked up her value and her knowledge of fine paintings, of tapestries,
what an amazing story. I know...
she was interviewed on 36th Street.
Yeah, that's where they are, 36th.
And she was a beautiful woman.
Madison, yeah, right.
Beautiful, charming, astute, intelligent. She was a female powerhouse.
Right.
Like Melanie in the control room.
Wow, that's going to really high
But
extreme.
here is the thing.
But this book was from 2007. That's really something. That's a major thing. I mean, that's really interesting because the Morgan Library is just absolutely incredible. Yeah. Absolutely, and the tribute. I mean, and the tradition.
So J.P. Morgan wanted her to get married to one of his buddies, but she was so fearful that her ancestry would be discovered that she always found something wrong with those arrangements. She would say, "Oh, he's a nice guy,
but
he has a great personality. He respects women and so on, but." He has a quirk that I don't approve of.
Or something, yeah. Well, that's an amazing thing. Now, that's the thing. Thank you for bringing that in. That's really, really, really interesting. Yeah, boy, you're a font of wisdom and understanding. I'm wondering about this, if you could, back to the Tahibi thing, and saying that this is unbridled. It was a major time for the United States. You and I were young. We were born. We were about the same time. It was born into the Depression, but coming up into the afterward, and the war was going to lift all boats, as it were, and so forth. And then after the war, for about 50 or 60 years after the war, with America emerging as a superpower, the European powers and the Japanese power had been diminished and decimated and so forth. So it was a time of tremendous growth. That was the time in which you and I grew up, was in the time of just a thing where everything was going up. Everything was going up. It was a major time that seems to have been culminated in this They didn't learn the lessons, apparently, of the 30s by the time they got into the 90s. And then you had this thing with the Glass-Steagall goes and all the reforms of Roosevelt. I mean, some of them stay and everything. You always accumulate that. But then we had this another great period, but it was lifting all boats in a certain sense. Republican, Democrat, they were going. And so, we were born into a time of great growth for the United States economy, were we not?
Yes.
I mean, everything was going great guns in terms of there was room for everybody, and there was the civil rights thing could find its way and all that kind of stuff. And now something's gone astray, do you think, in the since about 2007 or 8 or something, when the economy crashed again and so forth? We're trying to get over that. Is the idea that we're at a time of unprecedented greed and so forth, or we've come to the end of an era, or is it a continuation of what has always been with just a little interlude? Are we coming out of it? What is your thought about the future as we look ahead? We're both older, but for the younger people coming up, do you think there's angst there, deliberately so, or do you think maybe we're going to come out of it, out of the tailspin that's been there since about 2008? And that sort of thing. Particularly, there's a couple of gentlemen who are a little bit older than some of the young people who might be viewing.
Well, I don't know all the answers, but
wait a minute, stop. There's no point. I thought you had them all down. I thought you had every single answer all figured out in chapter and verse.
Here is the thing.
I'm making a joke. Yeah.
I just want to give you an anecdote. I used to go to the Thalia movie house.
Yeah, I remember.
Which is gone now. And the guy who used to tear up the tickets, that was his job. He was there year after year and day after day. He told me on his salary of tearing up tickets, he had an apartment around the corner on 96th Street, and he was sending his son to college. Now that's an impossibility. Now that job is nothing. Or when I went into the stationery store, there was a guy there.
You're talking now or back then?
Who was there 35 years. That was back then. And so on. So many of these people had these ordinary jobs forever, and they made a living. They were able to pay.
Kids go to college.
I mean, people who worked in a 5 and 10. That's another thing that disappeared. People who worked in a 5 and 10 could dream about buying a car.
Or
could dream
easily,
about a house. Or going on business. You could always go in business on Columbus Avenue. That was drug infested.
Or I was in Detroit. You could go get a job at General Motors and send the kids to college and everything. You had all kinds of medical. You had everything. Everything was coming up roses. For a long time. And what happened, do you think?
And it was, a few things happened. One thing, of course, is the computer. And this technology that can replace millions of us and so on. That's one thing that happened. Another thing happened was, like Richard Wolff said, since Roosevelt left office, they have been taking more and more away from us through greed.
Well, okay, go on. Go on. Spell it out.
And also, they've been taking more and more away. And they've been working essentially against the New Deal all these years.
Well, there are people that would be working against... There were people who were working against the New Deal when it was first announced, right from the beginning.
And then they were taking away unions, so now only 7% of the working force belongs to unions.
I think it's even less than that in the private sector. If there wasn't for the public sector, the unions, they used to be a real power, and they did not seem to do anything other than get an increase in the salary that they were able to commandeer because their work was really required. And now they never did get in terms of any, what would be outside of homes. The one thing they were able to do was to be able to obtain a home, the value of which would go up steadily every month. You buy it for $5,000, it's worth $10,000 5 years out, and it's worth $20,000 and $30,000. That's the way the lower classes or lower middle class there got some net worth, is their residential property, the appreciation of it, and that crashed. And now, but they never had any access to stocks and bonds or any of the other stuff that the capitalists had, that you make an investment that's going to pay for itself out of its future earnings, which was limited only to the very wealthy because they had the collateral that could get the advantage of that. That's never, so the capital assets that are increasingly responsible for production were owned by a tiny plutocratic class. They became more concentrated, and that's one of the problems that still exists with us. There's no way for getting income to people other than through their labor, and the labor is being displaced.
Yes.
Isn't that a problem?
Yes.
And it doesn't seem to be addressed by our political or intellectual leadership.
That's true.
You think that?
Yes.
So that's causing a situation that has existential significance now?
And then the radical left has been dismantled. Or, we had a communist party, a socialist party, and even our left-wingers in major political parties have disappeared. In fact, I even remember good people in the Republican Party. I'll mention one, Jacob Javits.
Jacob Javits.
There's nobody like Jacob Javits now. No. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And our radical and progressive leadership has disappeared.
Well, what do we mean by when we say that? That's something worth examining. To the degree we're all complicit, because we could try to blame the people who are overwhelmingly successful, but we all vote. We all vote for things. We go. The leadership could have taken of the labor unions when they had real power, 40-50% of the nation. They had real power and clout, a place right across from the White House, and they did not seem to argue for the right issues. They only argued for the importance of labor, of work, when the trend was for the productive process to be increasingly not needing the work, because it was being taken over by not only these could be seen, the exponential increasing capability of information technology and robotics are taking over the productive process of material goods. And it could have been seen that there ought to be some way to relate the people en masse to the way things are being produced rather than just labor. But labor and the progressive communities all tied into the labor theory of value to give value so they can get another minimum wage or something like that. Mm-hmm. But they never argued for any access to capital instruments or so, because they thought that is something that is the evil institution, private property or private ownership of capital instruments. What do you think of that? If the robots are taking over, shouldn't somebody have, if they have a piece of ownership of a robot that's producing stuff, they would have income coming to them, but not by their labor, but by the fact that they are, like in a certain sense, owners of the capital instruments producing the wealth. It doesn't seem to have dawned within the progressive community. So they are responsible for not having come up with an alternative in keeping with what the times are calling for.
No, what you're saying is valid.
I don't know if it is or not.
The thing is, how do we get to the threshold of what you're talking about? Because, in all honesty, when they talk about the minimum wage nowadays, and, the good people like Mr. Liu, yeah. He was talking about, he said by his figures, the minimum wage they should be asking for is $10.50 an hour. I say that's baloney, or I can say it on MA, and then bullshit.
Uh-huh.
You cannot have, because that's before taxes. When you say a bus driver or a cab driver will, if they are very, very good, make $50,000 a year. That's before taxes. Mm-hmm. So what do they really make after the actual taxes, or the real taxes on paper and the hidden taxes? Probably they bring something home below the poverty level. So the first thing we have to do is get the population to say this minimum wage in New York should not be below $25 an hour, and even that's not good enough. No. And then that way of thinking, and then not only that, but when they say they're going to give you $10.50 an hour, and it's not going to be fully realized until, till 2016. I mean, this is all bullshit to mislead the people. So to get to the threshold of where we can talk about what you're saying intelligently is even a struggle on the labor theory of values. What you're saying is very, very right. And then
I'm not sure, but it seems to be
this
in the
mechanism
cards.
here is driving me crazy.
Okay, that's a cell phone. That's a cell phone.
And besides, everything on this that you put on these things is recorded by the government. It may not be listened to. They don't listen to the Yentas in Riverdale and all that, talking about what's on sale in the picture.
Right.
But they record it. It is on recording.
Right.
Because just as it's hard for us to imagine how these drones can pinpoint, on one person, one tiny speck on the planet,
there's a lot
with
of
their cameras, they record everything. Everything is being recorded.
I saw on Google today, they not only got Google where you can get a map and everything, they now got a thing that can be using algorithms to get a slideshow of the development of that place over time. A place on the map, you can do it. So all of these things are going, and it's going exponential, and there's nothing going to stop it.
So
it's also the robotics are coming along just as rapidly. The robotics are coming along, and since they had containerization, they could go around and exploit labor where they're still doing it in the traditional sweatshop way and everything. But the fact of the matter is we have a tremendous productive capability to provide goods and services and everything and knowledge and everything like that to the people, but we don't have a way. The problem is going to be a problem of being able to distribute effective buying power or demand to the people because they're not needed in the productive process like they have been essential out of history. And the left or the progressives are all tied, the Marxists are all tied with the surplus value of labor.
That's right.
That everything's created by labor, and it's all everything other than labor is congealed labor, and it's, they got that. And they're tied into that, and they're somehow tied into the idea it's so wonderful for everyone to be a serf on an estate, and it's okay for a few people to own everything, rather than have the people own something of the machines that are producing the wealth, seems to be. And so the progressive community is at fault in a lot, at least for not addressing that major problem that's confronting humanity, or the intellectuals are. It seems to me.
That's right.
Or the political leadership is. The only way to distribute it is through jobs.
You've essentially hit the nail on the head, but things are so confused.
Yes, indeed.
So convoluted, so unethical, so immoral, so dysfunctional that we can't even solve very basic problems. Like, I'm a real strange character.
When I
go into...
I'll testify. Will you testify on my behalf in that regard, Mr. Gallagher? Yeah.
No, I'll go through New York. And it's impossible to find a gourmet meal in New York under a certain bracket, which is close to maybe $50 a meal. You go into the average restaurant, if you happen to run into a French gourmet who's looking for a job, or an Italian gourmet, or even an African American gourmet, you don't find them. What you find are these, they're good people, these people who are about all the same height from Latin America, in these cafes and restaurants, and it seems they're hiring people by what they're willing to be paid, not by their skills.
You mean like for waiters?
I have met some very, very competent grill men who are from Latin America. But generally, if you talk to the French, Italian, and African American kids who are looking for a job in a restaurant, they tell you they won't hire us because we want too much money.
Well, we got people that are coming from abroad.
So that's so we have so many confusing things like that going on.
Yeah. So we've had this great thing, and now this it's building up. So it seems to be there's a real dilemma, because we have a very real conflict between, and then also, Josh, just we were talking geopolitics and all that. It's always been a few people run everything. It seems to me. Yeah. I mean, you the people are wallowing around in the mud, or Dickensian conditions, and a few people are living the high life and in the castles and that. It's always been like that. It remains that way, and it seems to be. But we now have a capability of a massive ability to produce qualitatively good products and so forth that could get through to where there's enough productive capability to make everyone's life enjoyable and prosperous and everything. We have the ability to take care of everybody in a way that we simply haven't had historically. We were limited in the part of what we were able to produce. We got penicillin, we got antibiotics, we got progress. There's a lot of progress, but that in order for them to be able to participate in a democratic way, they have to have some way to be able to have the enjoyment of what we're able to produce. And in the end, the people with all the ownership, they're just doing what they know how to do. And in a sense, you don't blame them for being productive and everything, but it's the political class and the intellectual class for not having seen this coming and setting up an alternative of how we're going to form capital. Maybe think 5 years out. It takes about 6 or 7 years for the capital to pay for itself, to not be limited only to past savings in order to have investments made in the instance of a constituency that's going to be able to get, after it starts throwing off productive gain. That's the logic of business finance. That should be extended to everybody.
Yes.
But it's 5 years, so they're saying we have to do it now, and and then you've got all the institutions that we've inherited out of history, and so forth. So it's the intellectuals that are falling down on the job, it seems to me, and it would be calling into some things like some of our Fuller and Asimov and some of the or even Kurzweil and some of the people that are talking about the Zeitgeist movement or something, that something other than just work or jobs have to be a means by which buying power can be got to the people. We do have transfer payments. We worked that out. That probably all has to be incorporated, the traditional things we've inherited out of history. But what we've inherited out of history with the nuances of it are not adequate to what the future requires. We need some sort of a visionary change if we don't, because the weapons have become species lethal.
That's right.
The weapons is the means by which political legitimacy has always been established. Whoever could hit the other on the heads established legitimacy. Yeah. And that's now gotten to the point where that's no longer tenable, because the weapons will wipe out the entire species. There's a new kind of thing coming that the historical patterns just don't have precedent for. It seems to me.
I watch Russian TV, which is in English.
Yeah.
So, and I sort of like Putin to an extent. So they asked Putin, "What's your opinion about Obama's assessment that you're a regional power?" So he mentioned your name. He said, "Well, we're only a regional power, but we can make Harold Hudson Shanner's backyard disappear because we're only a regional power." The thing you see from the balcony. Yeah. We can make that Empire State Building disappear in seconds, but we're only a regional power. But you could tell Mr. Obama that he's only a 2-term president, and I've been in power longer than 8 years.
He's trying to revive the
Of course, I'm joking.
No, I understand, but he's real and everything like that. And the thing in the Crimea, they've had a claim to Crimea, and there was there and everything. Whether what's going on in Eastern. The claim that the Western powers have to a system that's going to serve all, and we're stuck with it. We've bailed out the banks. We bailed it all out. We took a lot of people out of their homes. Yeah. And now we still don't have a system that is in place. We're just saying, let's create jobs. Jobs, jobs, jobs. And the movement the movement of the times is away from that as a way in which things are being produced. So there's still a large problem that doesn't seem to be addressed to me. And the old system of the socialist versus the capitalist, you got to have some sort of a combination of them. And I'm looking in vain for people who are going to face that thing and say we've got to face up to the fact that we need some alternative way because the people need to have the money to be able to buy the lifestyle that is liberating and is available to us, but we don't have the ability to get buying power into their hands without bending things all out of shape using the old ways, the outdated ways. I don't know. I'm rambling on.
I have a book at home.
You have lots of books at home.
Titled Jobs. And you know who the author is? Henry Wallace.
Henry Wallace.
And the whole book is about how to create jobs and the jobs that we intend to create in the New Deal. Now, I would like to see Biden write a book like that.
Well, the jobs were created and they were relevant. WPA, there were things that were done. There were things that could have done.
Yeah.
And the labor distribution, it worked. But it's not working now.
No, not at all.
I mean, I submit. I may be wrong. Maybe they can just create jobs and so forth. But you're going to be able to massively, Mr. Keynes said, you're going to be able to massively displace labor. And if you're displacing labor in the productive process and you're not got an alternate way for them to get income, well, you could try to do a wealth tax or something, Ravi Batra or something. But I think we need better than what our political and our intellectual leaders are providing, and where they could get that is from Josh Volinski's bookstore, because he's one who connects all these things.
Well, I want to say one thing to you. Yesterday, of course, we got rid of malaria, which is wonderful.
Penicillin
and polio,
came, that helped.
And,
polio,
and we, thank God, don't have cholera. I'm thinking of cholera because Coley Clark brought it up yesterday.
Yeah,
and I gave her one anecdote, which is very true. When my mother was 2 years old, during the Bolshevik Revolution, a cavalry group of White Russians and Tartars came into the village, and they were brandishing their sabers. And here's my mother in the roadway, a little 2-year-old child, and these brigades were known in beheading everybody in the village, and they were brandishing. So they look at my mother, who's 2 years old, a little child, and says, "Where's your mother and father?" So my mother says, "They're in the house with cholera." When she said that, the whole brigades
may be a lesson.
They rode away.
There may be a lesson.
That's a true story.
Well, that is a true story.
Whoever expected a little 2-year-old.
We have a tyranny in this universe, and one of them is time. We run out of time, my brother. So good to talk to you, Josh. Your pleasure. Josh Volinski, bibliotech guy, very extreme, producer of programming here at MNN, a major networker, and thanks a lot for everything.
My show is Monday, 9:30.
9:30 p.m. 9:30, and it's Josh Volinski's show. So you heard it here. Thanks a lot, Josh. We'll be coming back again tomorrow. Thanks a lot in the booth for producing this, and we're coming back again tomorrow. Thanks for viewing. Okay, well, we got all over the